webinar today on the August 27. We're going to be together for almost an hour. Sometimes I run over by 10 minutes, but I will do my best to stick to the hour. So I want to welcome you all. Welcome Abdullah, Al Farouk as well, mashallah, Amir, Carlos, Doris, Fatima, Hamad, Jacqueline. We have John and Muhammad. We have Kais with us as well, Selma and Sana, Taha. Wow, we have a nice group. That's fantastic. So welcome you all. It is a pleasure to have you with us. I like to jump into the topic right away. So typically, let me tell you what's going to happen in the next hour. A very, very quick introduction about Meirc, but after that, a little bit of introduction about myself. It should be less than, seconds only, because typically what happens is I send this presentation to you. So you can read about the company and you can read about me and through the slides I sent you. So take note of the email that you have in front of you. And at the end, if you like the presentation, I will be more than happy to send it across. And this way you can cover the things that I typically go through very fast. So organizational leadership is a very interesting topic, and it probably makes lots of sense today in light of the COVID-19, what's happening with organizations and everything now. I've given this webinar before, but I'm giving it again because probably I will talk from the perspective of what we are all going through, which is quite interesting. It's an interesting experience what we're going through, whether individuals or organizations. So let me go ahead and start. First of all, I like to okay, so here's the a little bit about the company. Again, this is just very quick flash what the company is, where we started. Plus is another sister company. So again, I'm going to leave it up to you to go through it. I'm not going to spend time on this. A little bit about myself. This is who I am here. I've been with Meirc for 8 years, and but you can read about my background and everything. I love cycling, but I also managed to develop some other sports recently. So you can read about me, and I'm also on LinkedIn. So make sure that you connect with me on LinkedIn, and be more than happy and honored to have you part of my network. So let me move on. This is where I want to jump in. So I like to cover a few things, and as you can see, this is a very interesting topic, organizational leadership, and I try, within the limited time I have with you, is to cover this topic. And I tell you, I'm not gonna give it enough attention, because organizational leadership is a very important topic today, whether from a leadership perspective, organizational perspective, behavioral perspective, you as an employee perspective, whether manager or somebody else. So these are the objectives I'm going to cover. The relation between organizational behavior and the leadership in the workplace, developing an understanding about people, because you are part of the organization. So who are you in that organization? Differentiate between the different approaches of motivation. Here, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be covering motivation, and I'm going to have a very quick glide through these motivational approaches. And I'll tell you why, because from my experience, it's good to know them, but do you practice them? Probably you practice them in one way or another. And then I'm going to explain organizational leadership and communication. And also, this is a very important topic within the organization. How do we communicate with each other? And then analyze leadership and management styles a little bit. And, how do we apply leadership skills? So that's why when I put together this program, and usually we run it over 5 days, and sometimes 3 days if it's virtual leadership or virtual learning, but it is a very interesting topic. And I fell in love with, if you look at my background, I worked a lot with leaders and management. So, but overall, I believe that this particular topic, organizational leadership, is of value today, especially with what's going on with us. You have lots of questions on your mind. So I hope to some extent I answer some of your concerns as an employee, as a manager, as a leader. But at the same time, I hope that it opens doors for you where you can go and seek some questions. Some answers for your questions. So leadership and organizational behavior, this is our first incursion into the world of leadership and organizational behavior. So before I go too far, I'm going to ask you questions. So I hope and I look forward to your participation through these questions. So what I typically do is I ask you a question and you have to answer based on what I show you on the screen. This keeps you awake, keeps you active. You know, they are not difficult questions. The intention here is not to quiz you, but to keep you alert and, you know, always make sure that you're attentive and, you know, engaging with us. And this is something we apply in our learning in Meirc. So here we go. So here comes the first question. Okay, so the question I'm asking you, leadership has no impact on organizational behavior. True or false? So let me go through the surveys, and here comes question number one. So, all right, so question number one, leadership has no impact on organizational behavior. True or false? Let's see. Okay, very good. I typically give you up to a minute, but I see that, you know, the reaction is very, very good. Thank you for that. I appreciate the fact that you are interacting with these, with the surveys or questions. So leadership has no impact on organizational behavior. All right. I'll give everybody 5 more seconds just to, you know, the intention here again is not to quiz you as much as to keep you engaged with us throughout this. All right, so let me go ahead and end the voting. I will show you what the results are. So I'm going to end the voting. Very good. And I'm going to share the results with you. Here we go. So as you can see, majority of you have answered, you know, leadership has no impact. It's false. Some of you said, you know, has no impact. Fine. I mean, as again, I'm not quizzing you here, but in reality, and from the world I come from the corporations I worked for, from the things that I watch and I observe and I follow up on and I do research on, leadership has tremendous amount of impact on the organizational behavior. And I tell you, I worked with some phenomenal leaders. They were fantastic. And some leaders who were not that, you know, they were leaders in their own right. What it means that they were in leadership position. Some of them left an impressive impression on me, and some others did not. So they do have impact on organizational behavior. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this one. I'm going to go back to my slides. Okay, so thank you for answering that one. Now, this is a very good statement. It comes from Lynn Wood. She's the CEO of Duke Energy. I think she retired. I think she retired in last year or the year before. But I like what she says. And if you notice what she's saying here is she's trying to define leadership in her mind. And what makes leadership effective? As you can see here, this is the question we are trying to ask. So what she says, leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room. So this tells you something, is that are we talking about IQ or are we talking about EQ? Are we talking about intelligence in the sense that are you smart in physics, math, chemistry, whatever? Or are you the kind of person who can deal with people, can talk to people, communicate, can you motivate? So as you can see, there's a big difference between IQ, which is the intelligence that is born with you, and EQ, which in many ways we talk about emotional maturity, emotional intelligence. And then she continues, it's being the most effective person. So effective people, to me, get the most out of the team of people they are responsible for. And this is very, very important distinction here. I want you to think about, how do I get the most out of people? Now, do you get it out of fear, by scaring them, threatening them, or by developing trust and talking to them in a trustworthy way, in a convincing way? You see, this is the world of leadership. It's very, very exciting. So leadership is getting the people to move forward, to adapt, to deliver. And talking about adaptation, you know, we are going through tremendous amount of adaptation these days with COVID-19 forcing itself on us. I mean, listen, adaptation is the name of the game today. I mean, we have to adapt. If you're not adapting as a person, your company is adapting. Your company is trying to survive. And along its survival journey, you are also trying to survive as well. So in my opinion, that's what she said. She continues, in my opinion, you should surround yourself with the most diverse thoughts you could find and the strongest people you are capable of bringing into the organization. So you see how organizational leadership has a tremendous impact on your organization. And I have seen in my life where leaders make mistakes in the type of people they bring to the organization. Sometimes they bring people they don't like to argue with them. But how can you be creative and innovative if you're not willing to listen to the other person? So it's an interesting story, and I recommend that you go deep into this discussion about organization and leadership. It's very, very exciting. This takes us to some leadership styles that the person who coined the term emotional leadership. He said, you know what? Based on this emotional leadership, I can identify 6 styles of leadership. His name is Daniel Goleman, as you can see here. His name is Daniel Goleman. Very, very interesting person, and he has lots of videos, and you can, listen to him in more detail. But based on his analysis and his research with a couple of other colleagues who worked on emotional intelligence, they said we typically see 6 styles of leadership between the commanding, the visionary, the affiliative, the democratic, the pace setting, and coaching. And you can see here that the description behind each style, what does the person normally say when he is applying a certain style? What is the underlying emotional intelligence or competence for that person? When is this style best applied? And what's the impact of this style on the organization? So remember what the topic of this webinar is, organizational leadership. And you can see that the style of leadership has quite an impact on the organization. Now, the smart leader knows how to use these styles at the right time. And this is something I appreciate if you take note of it. You might like a certain leadership style, but that leadership style may not be convenient or may not fit in a certain situation. So smart leaders know when to use a particular style in a certain situation. So always remember that. And we will refer to that one later on. So these styles can take us to what I call something very, very important is how do we deal when it comes to how do we distribute this leadership style? And this takes us to something that Robert Blake and Jay Mouton talked about when it comes to leadership based on your concern for people or your concern for production. So if you are very much into people, then you're a very nice person. So your leadership style is you're very accommodating, you give in to people's demands, you want people to be happy. But what happens to results? In this case, results may suffer. But on the other end, if you are very much task-oriented, as you can see here in this area right over here, then people may run away from you. People may hate you. Say, you know what, this guy is always chasing us on things to do. And then you have the person in the middle who we typically kind of, appreciate. And then of course you have those leaders who typically don't have any task orientation or people orientation, and companies suffer. The one that I really like is somewhere over here in this grid over here. This is where we talk about team leadership, where you manage to work with people, talk to people, persuade people, convince people, but at the same time, you don't give up and you don't, sacrifice the task. You as a leader, still you are responsible for the tasks, but you're also responsible for developing the right culture in the organization and the right atmosphere in the organization. So that's why team leadership is very much about collaboration, collaborative approach, a collaborative approach. And this is something we see more and more today. So this grid is very important. And this reflects in many ways what we talked about before about the 6 styles, is that, you have to be careful how to deal with people, how to deliver on your deliverables or your tasks, but how can you keep a nice, productive environment, happy people in the workplace? Did you see that? So we talked about leadership styles. We talked about this particular grid. But what are the leadership characteristics that we admire in leaders? And this is where, Peter Economy, he came up with certain studies and he highlighted 9 traits that define leadership. And you can see that these traits are many ways they are common to the leadership styles we talked about. I mean, if you are a commander, then you have to be decisive sometimes. But if you are a visionary, you may have to be empathetic or optimistic. You also have to be inspirational. And so, depending on what leadership style that you follow, these are important traits that you need to focus on a regular basis. Now, you may have some of them 5 out of 10, some of them may be 7 out of 10. So I like to ask you is always reflect upon what is it that makes you different in terms of your leadership skills or managerial skills. Because come to think of it, where do leaders come from? Leaders come from managers. So some managers, they become quite um, good at their job, so they ask them to assume a leadership position. And based on what? Based on these traits. So they see, is this person confident? Is he accountable? Is she aware of certain things? Can she bring focus? So this is very important. So these traits are important. Are there more traits? Of course there are. But based on his studies, he's saying that these are the 9 that people like. There's more than 50 traits that people look in leaders, but these 9 people usually like. And these traits, we see them in organizational leadership. So we talked about leadership to a certain extent. And here, I do apologize for what happened to the slide a little bit, but we're defining organizational leadership. And I'll fix it once I send it to you. I'll make sure I fix this particular square over here so that you can read what organizational leadership is all about, or organizational culture. And this particular, we're talking about organizational culture. And you belong and work in a particular culture. But what is organizational culture? Come to think of it. It is a system of shared accountabilities, assumptions, values, beliefs, which governs how people behave in organizations. So culture is very important. And when we talk about leaders, leaders have huge impact on the culture that is in the workplace. Either they can make it trustworthy or they can make it doubtful. People doubt each other. And sometimes, you can feel it the minute you walk in. And leaders have that impact on organization. That's why we call it organizational leadership. And that's why, as a person, as talking to you, I stress a lot on the positive leadership that creates the right organizational culture, the culture that people feel happy, they feel productive, and they like to give to the organization. Now, of course, in light of the COVID-19, it's not easy what we're going through. I'm not gonna butter the situation we're going through. But I also believe that organizations that are dealing with their people the right way these days, and they are managing to maintain and keep the right people in their organization, they have a very important edge in the next few months. Because we cannot keep working like this, come to think of it. So we're hitting rock bottom somehow. And now we're heading more and more toward an exit from this. So organizations that maintain a very good culture, a very good organizational structure, they have a very good place in the next few months. So are you contributing to this? Are you working with your manager to maintain this culture, organizational culture? That being said, okay, some characteristics of successful organizations today are those organizations that are innovative. They give attention to detail. They are very good quality. I'm talking about quality here. They emphasize the outcome. This means that if I take Adil, for example, or if I take Abdullah, he knows what he's doing. This means that everybody knows what they are focusing on. It emphasizes on people. This means that people are still the main asset here. Teamwork, remember what I talked about collaboration. Now, I don't want you to be scared about the word aggressive. Aggressive doesn't mean that you shout at people. No, that's not what I mean. Being aggressive from an organizational culture point of view is that you actually pursue your goals in a very aggressive way. You don't give up. And yet you maintain stability. Look how beautiful that is. So, despite the ups and downs that we go through, you maintain some sense of stability, but you're very aggressive behind your goals. Now, if you think about COVID-19 and what happened, companies who were very aggressive in turning the company around, they moved very fast, they changed a few things very fast, are the companies that managed to survive. While companies who were, easygoing, they fell behind. So these characteristics from an organizational culture point of view are extremely, extremely important. And you can contribute to each one of them to make sure that the organization you're working for is a successful one. Now, this takes us to the following, and this is also very important. So we talked about organizational culture. Now, come to think of it, within your culture, you're behaving. And funny enough, the culture that you're in many ways, to some extent, shapes your behavior. Why? Because there are rules and regulations. There are procedures you have to follow. There is management style and leadership style. You have teams you have to work in. So you can imagine how the organizational culture in many ways is shaping your organizational behavior. And you cannot run away from it. So we as individuals, we're interacting with these cultures. So my organizational behavior, I as Jamal Saeed, for example, is how I was raised and brought up. And I bring it to the workplace where I'm in, and my culture tries to interface with the organizational culture. So we develop an organizational behavior. And this is very, very critical. So I want you to understand that there's a huge interaction between you, what you believe in, and the organization you're working for. So organizational behavior studies the impact individuals, groups, and structures have on a human behavior, on your behavior. And these structures, by the way, start with your leadership. Here comes a new leader into the organization and says, I like to work this way. Sometimes they shrink the structure or the organizational chart. Sometimes they increase it. Sometimes they hire a lot. Sometimes they let people go. Why? Because they're developing the culture that they feel is right to deliver on the results that they have been requested to deliver. And either you are leading or you are part of the formula. So that is why I ask you to look into your organization with a critical mindset. And instead of getting upset or getting frustrated with your culture, try to find ways to interact with that culture. So, with that in mind, this takes us to the fact that we are seeing a tremendous change in technology, communication. And funny enough, what happened with COVID-19 is something that we never, in many cases, we didn't see. Now, people have been talking about epidemics and pandemics, but we never thought it will impact us in such a big way. And this has made lots of shifts on many fronts. You cannot work from home. You cannot come to work. You have to work from home. You have to wear a mask. You have to do this. You have to do that. I mean, even if you meet with customers, you have to go on Zoom or Skype to meet with your customers. So imagine how within the period of 5 months, it seems or feels like our life has turned upside down. This also is a major trend for us. And probably this is the talk of the hour, is how my organization is changing and what's the shape of my organization in 4 or 5 months. Would I still be in this organization, or would I look for another job where I can use my new skills, I develop new skills? I tell you, COVID-19 has left many open questions, but with these open questions, many new opportunities are coming up. Believe it or not, yes, many new opportunities are coming up, and I hope you are part of that. So when we talk about trends and changes and organizational culture and the what have you, we talk in many ways about the structure, we talk about the systems, and we talk about the structure that we are seeing in organization. And COVID-19 is accelerating these things. By the way, don't be surprised that structure is changing, system is changing, culture is changing. Technology was doing that anyway. So the fact that we got exposed to technology in such a big way, okay, we were changing the structure of our companies. We were changing the systems. We were changing the culture. COVID-19 was only the conduit to accelerate it. And this gave technology even a faster way to look into these things in a more critical way. So as you can see, your structure has changed, the systems have become faster, and the culture has kind of evolved as well. So these three areas will always be there. And it's very important that you interface with the structure of the company, with the systems and the culture of the company on an ongoing basis. So have a look into the future and ask yourself, what kind of a company would I like to work for? 21st century organization is already here, and COVID-19 only made it faster. So this means that the latest trends in comes to organizational leadership, the business is becoming more complex. There's a huge talent shortage. Now, as you can see, probably you are wondering, how do I use Zoom? I tell you, before COVID-19, I didn't even bother to use Zoom. But now, Zoom is an important competency I have to deal with. If I want to deal with my clients, my participants, I have to know how to deal with remote training. So this, otherwise, I'll be out of a market. So as you can see, talent is evolving very fast, and you have to learn new things, whether programming, coding, selling online, all of these things. And there is a shortage. There's a huge shortage. So find the shortage and skill yourself up. The second thing is that development in first-line leaders. Leadership is changing. We get requests on how to lead remotely. So this means that I have to understand how to lead people from a remote place. New leadership skills, how to convince people online, how to engage people, employee engagement, how to keep them engaged. And the same thing with collective leadership and individual leadership, how we lead as a team, but at the same time, how do I lead as an individual? And the training, as I just gave you an example of myself, training is changing quite a bit. So all of these challenges are becoming trends, and you have to be aware of these trends. And I ask you as a listener to this webinar, is stay ahead of the trends. See what's going on and train yourself. Otherwise, you fall behind. So always stay ahead of time. If you take me as a person, I tell you, over the past 4 or 5 months, I managed to get myself on some certification because I know I need them. And I want you to do the same thing. So with that in mind, please remember that you are very important. You, the Generation Y, the young people on this call, whether it is Carlos, Adil, Abdullah, whether it is Kais, whether it is Samir, Saima, you guys are the young people. You are shaping the future. I look at myself as a transitional person, a person who is between generations. You are the ones who are going to shape the future. So you have to decide how the workplace is going to be and the shape of the organization, behavior, structure, all of these things. You are the ones who are going to shape it. That's why Generation Y, millennials, you are the ones who are shaping the future of industries. And don't be afraid. The main thing is that you have to define in many ways the approach for relationship. How do you work there? How do you learn new things? How do you come to your workplace? How do you deal with your workplace? Lots of things on your shoulders, but I think of them as something extremely, extremely exciting. Now, we finished with the first part where we talked about leadership in the workplace, and we talked about the fact, how it impacts organizational behavior. But now we come to the second part where we talk about understanding people at work, and that is you. So, I'm going to ask you now question number 2. So, are you ready? Let's go for it. Question number 2 says, individual differences matter at work. True or false? So here comes the survey, and here comes the question number 2. Let me see. Survey. Yeah, I'm going to give you question number 2 here. So here we go. And are you ready? Please go ahead. Individual differences matter at work. Let's see. I want to welcome Taysir. Taysir, welcome back. Yazid, welcome. Taha as well. Serene, thank you for being with us today. That's a fantastic group we have today. So, individual differences matter at work. True or false? Very good. Now, it looks like we have a fair amount of replies. So I'm going to end the voting here and I'm going to share the results with you. So here we go. Here's the results. As you can see, we have a bit on the false side, but we have quite a bit of you who answered no, the individual differences do matter. And I agree that individual differences do matter. And I always ask you, always appreciate the differences in the workplace. And whether it is from a cultural point of view or from people coming from different places, appreciate the differences. It's very important because differences between individuals is what creates new ideas. That's what compels companies or impels companies to move forward. So thank you, well done. So here we go. Now, we're going back to my slide, okay, my presentation. So to those of you who answered true, well done. To those of you who answered false, maybe you have a point of view that I may have missed, but in general, differences do make a difference, individual differences. So individual differences matter because it is your personality, my dear friend. If I look at Abid, Abid has his own personality. If I look at Abdullah, Abdullah has his own personality. But the question here is, with our different personalities, are we willing to work within an organizational culture? This is very, very important. Fatima may like certain things. Ibrahim may like other things. The question here is, can you work with each other? Remember, this is something normal in the workplace. So human beings bring in their personality, physical and mental abilities, and other traits to the workplace. So this is normal. That's you. And if I want to caution you about something. If you feel that the culture in the workplace is changing you, you may not be happy. You say, you know what, this place is not for me, and you may end up leaving. So we tend to look for cultures that help us develop our personalities and in many ways be ourselves. Now, there is a common ground you have to find. But here comes the big thing, is that how do we understand the individual differences? Now, there are two things that we look at. When we hire employees, companies are normally interested, does this person fit within the organization? Now, that's very important. That's from organizational point of view. So leaders try to bring people who fit in the organization. But the other big one is, do they fit in the job? So if you're applying for a job today, let's say Jacqueline is applying for a job, the first thing they will ask, does she fit in our organization? How would they know? From the way she dresses, from the way she talks, from the way she interfaces her ideas, all of these things. Then the other thing is, does she fit in the job? Now they ask about her skills. Where did you get your degree? Where did you get your experience? These two are important for you to work within an organization. So before you apply for a company, also ask yourself, is this company for me? You can look, on several websites today, many companies, they tell you about the company, about the culture, all of these things. Glassdoor is a wonderful place for you to understand the company. It's called glassdoor.com. So you can go and understand the company and what employees say about their company. So this is very important. So whenever you go into an organization, your fit into the organization is important, and your fit into the job is very important. And this, in many ways, talks about values. So when we talk about values, this is very important. You see, that's where your values come in. This is your behaviors, your values, what you believe in. Because in many ways, they impact employment. Okay? Are you a very, very rigid person about truth? Yes and no, black and white. Or are you able to give and take a little bit? Are you willing to listen to other people? I mean, all of these things are very important. So that is why after this course, do a self-reflection. Ask yourself, what kind of a person am I? I'm not asking you to change, but I'm asking you to understand yourself better. All right? So this takes us to the following. And that's why I insist on this thing, because it is very important that your personality, you understand that your personality encompass certain feelings and thoughts and behaviors. So if your personality is stable, does it mean it does not change? No. I think during the process of your career, you might change some principles in your life. But at the same time, there are certain things that they will never change. That's you, that's your personality. And companies understand that. The other questions that you have to ask is, our behavior in organizations dependent on our personality? To some extent, yes. But sometimes you have to accommodate the company's culture, because that's what we talked about. Organizational leadership causes organizational culture. So when in our attempt to open these two questions, 5 personality traits impact you in one way or another. How open are you? How open are you? Are you willing? Are you curious? Are you creative? Are you open to new ideas? And this is a scale from 0 to 100 or 0 to 10. Some people are open to ideas. Some people are not. Some people, they stick with their thoughts no matter what you do. Are you conscientious? Are you being organized, systematic, punctual, show up on time? Some people, for them, doesn't mean anything. For example, let's say that John calls for a meeting. He says, guys, I want you to be there at 10 o'clock. 5 people show on time, couple of people show late. If John is very conscientious about that time, his reaction to the people who are late, please, next time, make sure that you show up on time. That's his values talking about it. And it could be the organizational culture he's working in. Extroversion, are you outgoing? Are you agreeable? Do you, easy to work with? Are you trusting? Are you warm? Or are you the other side? And then you have the neuroticism. Are you kind of an anxious person, irritable? So these 5 traits are very important, and lots of studies are around these 5 traits. Because sometimes somebody might say something that you don't like, and people will wonder, what did I say? Well, you didn't like it. Certain words we say don't fit very well. So as you can see, your behavior within the organizations is very important. You understand who you are, what ticks you off, or what makes you happy. Remember, you're spending quite a bit of time within the organization, but you might ask, Jamal, I'm not in the office. It doesn't matter. Even if you are working remotely, when you are online and dealing with people, you still see people's faces or their reactions or the way they speak. And this makes it even more difficult, because I cannot see your face. You start building assumptions about people and their behavior. That's why I personally like the workplace, because at least I can see Fatima's face, I can see Doris's face, I can see other people's face. And this is, in many ways, has been taken away from us to some extent, because I cannot see the body language. Yet it's very important to keep an eye on that. Keeping that in mind, I like to remind you of the following: that at work, 2 particular job attitudes have the greatest potential to influence how we behave. So let's say that you joined the company, or you have been there for 5 years. Are you happy with your job? And based on that satisfaction, how committed you are to the organization. Remember, we're still talking about organizational leadership, organizational behavior, and you are part and parcel of that system that you are in, part of the structure, part of the procedures, part of all of that. So if you're not happy with your job, you have to find ways to make it happy. Talk to your manager, ask for certain, additional responsibilities maybe. But are you committed to the organization? This is something very interesting. I tell you, organizational commitment. Some people are happy with their job, but they have very little commitment to their organization. Maybe something in the past happened to them where they felt that the organization was not committed to them, and you reciprocate by lack of commitment. Some people call it loyalty. Some people say 100% loyal to the organization. That's fine. This is your call. But this is something about your attitude. How do you deal with the satisfaction in the job? And how committed are you to the organization itself that you are in? So attitude, from my perspective, is very important. And attitude is something very personal. And regardless of what conclusions you take from this webinar, in many ways, certain things rest on your shoulders. The biggest one is your attitude toward yourself, toward your job, and toward the organization. You might say, Jamal, you're putting too much on me. How about the leader? How about the organization, procedure? It's fine. All of that I buy from you. But also remember that you are working in that organization and your attitude makes a difference. Remember, companies also hire for attitude. Do you fit in the organization? Do you fit in the job? And attitude is a big one. How do you speak to the HR person? How do you speak to your manager? How do you deal with problems? How do you deal with your employees? How do you deal with your colleagues? All of that is, in many ways, the attitude behind it is very important. So the attitude is critical, and it can make your organizational experience quite interesting. There are several factors that contribute to job satisfaction and organizational commitment. Personality and attitude is part of that. The job characteristics themselves, the job characteristics, imagine. Is it a manual job? Is it a thinking job? Is it a mundane job? I mean, that's your job. You should know it. Organizational justice. Oh my goodness. This one is quite interesting because how fair is the system I'm working in? In many ways, if the company is fair, this means that they treat employees fairly. I'm not saying equal, fairly. If you're putting the effort, the company will reward you fairly. It's called organizational justice. And I tell you, in many ways, especially as we're going through this COVID-19, many companies are rethinking about organizational justice and how being fair and everything. I'll give you an example. Just recently, and it was announced yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, many of the airlines, they said, listen, we cannot keep our employees anymore because we're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Probably they do, but they said, we cannot keep these people. I cannot keep paying a person half a salary, full salary, whatever it is. So they had to let people go. Now, some people felt that it was not fair. Why was I let go? You see my point? Is that in many cases, organizations have to make a tough decision either to survive or to meet investors' requirements in terms of profit or making money. And when we talk about hospitality, aviation, especially if you're working in these companies, I can appreciate that these sectors, they took a big hit. And mind you, stress, I think everybody's feeling it. The stress is something common. And there's going to be lots of studies of the amount of stress we've been through with COVID-19, and probably we'll start seeing the stress more and more in the next few months as studies emerge. We're going to see how stress has changed our mindset, our thinking, and everything. Person environment fit, we talked about it. Psychological contract. What is a psychological contract? It's a contract between you and the company. When you come to a company, there's something psychological taking place. This means that you are kind of committing. It's unseen, by the way. It's not felt. It's not something tangible, but it works a lot, and it's very important. Work relationships, work-life balance, all of these things are important when it comes to the employee's attitude. So what makes an employee happy in the workplace? Is it your boss? Is it you? I always ask participants that try to find happiness and contentment within you first, and then try to deal with the system. That to me is very powerful. Always be happy with yourself. Don't try to find happiness in other people. Try to find it inside and then work outside. This makes you much stronger in the organization. Okay? So what makes employees happy today? Well, based on the research that we see, autonomy is one of them. People say, give me more decision making. Relationships, say a developing relationship in the workplace, in the work environment. Progress, finding out that you can progress in your job and you can take more responsibilities. And then the sense of meaning, that my job is meaningful. There's a purpose. Even after you leave the job, you feel that you delivered something, you contributed something. So making you happy in the workplace, these things are now showing more and more. And these 4 factors are making people leave their job. They're saying, you know what? I don't find these things anywhere in my job. So they decide to leave. Some people find it and they stay in their job. So these things are critical. This takes us to the second point. So we talked about fit for the job and fit in the environment. But there are other factors you have to keep in mind. Notice, when you are working in a company, your work behavior is also defined by your job performance. How do you perform in the job? And this takes us to, do you know your job well? Do you have the skills? Citizenship. Do you act responsibly and ethically within the organization? Absenteeism. Do you see lots of absenteeism in the workplace? That's not good. If you see people absent, and I'm talking about, working from home. No, no, no. You're talking about not committed to your job. You're not delivering on your um, responsibilities, and then turnover. Now, turnover sometimes is uh, forced by the company, but sometimes you decide to say, you know what, I'm not happy here anymore. It happens in all companies today. It happens in all companies. So these four factors are important when it comes to your work behavior. And also, I would like you to give it some thought because they are very, very important. With that in mind, studies show that when an organization has a moral climate, fairness, code of ethics, leaders apply certain roles, they are a role model when it comes to ethics, and that values has a moral climate that values doing the right thing, people tend to be happier at work. So when people see that their managers, leaders are doing the right thing, people are happier in the workplace, and they are more committed. You see that word commitment, it's showing up again here. So when you see that the company is acting ethically or morally, we tend to be more committed, the psychological contract, and less so when we feel that the company's leaders are not doing that at all. So that being said, in other words, increasing the frequency of ethical behavior is not enough. We have to create that climate. And that climate is not only by saying by the rules and the procedures. We want to see managers acting that role, employees acting the role. So we create the climate, or you can call it culture. And that's what we talked in the first place. So notice how beautiful this chart is. In this chart, you are working in one of these quadrants. And it might be way at the top here, or it might be way at the bottom here. So it depends where you are. But how does this role of ethics and culture, how does it operate? Notice that if you have very low level of commitment and citizenship, and you have very low of problem solving and complaint system, you are working in a very highly controlled, low trust working environment. Very red. You don't like that. But if you have a place where you have high complaints, lots of problems, okay, but there's not the level of commitment. At least people are complaining, people are talking, people are trying to fix something. Little ownership, but people are, disengaged, but they can complain. You call it moaning in many ways. But if there's a place where you have little complaint and very high ethical place, you find complacency. People don't talk. I'm happy, but I don't want to talk. I don't want to disturb the water. So notice how the relationship and the interaction is happening in the workplace. The healthy place is where people can voice their concern and somebody acts on it. This is where we'd like to be. You are probably already positioning yourself, or see in your mind, you see yourself in one of these quadrants. You're saying, you know what, I'm over there. If you are a leader, how can you move to the blue place, to the blue quadrant? What can you do to make it highly interactive, where people can speak, but people believe that and trust that the company will fix it? Otherwise, you're going to fall into the other quadrants, and things are going to be a bit tough, especially today with COVID-19. People are seeking more and more ethical and trustworthy environment, even though you might be distant from your workplace. I love this chart. I think this chart does a lot toward your thinking of what can I do in my workplace and how my managers and my leaders are behaving. This is in the heart of organizational leadership. Now, going on and moving on to our next slide, I like to talk about leadership and organizational motivation, because we talked about a couple of things so far. We talked about you in terms of your behavior. We talked about leadership, organization, and the styles and everything. But how do we motivate? Now, I mentioned at the beginning that I like to caution you about the fact that motivational theories are great, but in many ways, we typically don't apply them. We probably take a little bit here and there and apply what we understand. But theories are theories. And I'm not here to teach you theory, but I like to link some of these theories to how we behave. So here comes the question. Job performance is viewed as a function of motivation, ability, environment. True or false? Let's see. So here comes question number, if I'm not mistaken, is it number 3? Yes, there you go. So here we go. Can you vote on this one, please? Job performance is viewed as a function of motivation, ability, and environment. Do you agree or disagree? Very good. I'll just give you another 10 seconds just to make sure that, you know, you are able to answer. And even if you don't answer, that's okay. All right. So I'm going to end the voting right now. So here we go. For those who weren't able to vote, I do apologize. So I'm going to share the results with you. It looks like many of you have said it's the top one. But yes, job performance is viewed as a function of motivation, ability, and environment. Some of you did not feel that way. That's okay. I hope that we are able to change your opinion about job performance. And this is very critical. And remember, behavioral, organizational behavior, your individual behavior drives in many ways your motivation, your ability, your environment, or how you interact with motivation. So let me stop sharing here and let me go back to the slides. So well done to those of you who answered correctly. So the answer is here right away. So yes, job performance is viewed as a function of the three factors of motivation, ability, and environment. But what motivation? What is motivation? Now, if we talk theoretically, there are two types of motivation. There are those that are, involve, we call them need-based, as you can see here at the top of the slide, need-based. And some of the famous theorists who came up with theories around their observation of organization, by the way. They observed organization and they came up with these theories. One of them is Maslow, ERG theory, which is very similar to Maslow, but worded differently. Herzberg, I love Herzberg because Herzberg talks about two-factor theory. He talks about um, the important stuff, which is the basic stuff, okay? We call them the hygiene. And then you talk about the motivation factors. And then you have McClelland. McClelland also talks about certain needs, especially he talks about power and everything. So these are needs. They tackle the needs, your needs as a person. And then you have another set of theories. We call them the process-based. The process-based is called equity theory, expectancy theory, and reinforcement theories. And they approach things differently. They think of a motivation as a process. And notice the equity theory. Equity theory has lots of fairness in it. What does it mean? I like to stress the equity and the expectancy a little bit because that's probably what happens to us in the workplace. When I talk about equity theory, I usually ask people, compare yourself to somebody else in the organization. Do you feel that based on the skills that you have, you are being paid equally like the other person? If this person says yes, means that he's happy. He's okay. You know what? The system is fair. If he is paid more, he says, you know what? Maybe I deserve it because I'm better. But the problem happens if you are paid less than the other person and you start asking, why is that other person paid more? Why is Jacqueline paid more than I? You see? That's equity. This means that you're trying to find out, is the system fair or not? The same thing with expectancy theory. What is expected from you? And based on these expectations, are you willing to put the effort? You see how beautiful that is. So based on expectations, people put the effort. Based on the incentive, I'm putting the effort. Let's say, for example, one of you is working on a particular project. Let's take Manoj. Manoj is working on a big project. And based on the expectations, his boss told him, you know what? If you finish this project, I'm going to give you 10% bonus at the end of the year. 10% bonus is not bad. So Manoj puts the effort. But if he does not meet the goal, then the expectations are not there anymore. But if he meets the expectations, he is expecting that based on the effort he put, he's going to get the 10%. The same thing with reinforcement theory. The reinforcement theory talks about behavior. And I suggest that you look it up. It's very, very nice theory. And it talks about how we impact other people through our reactions to their behavior in the workplace. So at the end of the day, these theories, they impact how we look at the job design, how we do the goal setting, how do we do the performance feedback, and how we do the reward system. So these theories opened our eyes on how do I do my job design, okay? Job expectation, goal setting, equity or job expectations, performance feedback, could be Herzberg, reward system, the same thing, Herzberg. So you can see that these 4 items here, these 4 points when it comes to your job and your happiness in the job, from how is your job designed, how your goals are set, how your performance feedback that you receive is delivered, and how your reward system works, they are interlinked with the theories that the scientists or social scientists came up with. So they observed what happened, and in many ways we apply them through these factors. So that is why these theories are important. You may not apply them, but in many ways they work. So that's why get engaged with these theories, get to know them, how they operate, because you can learn a lot from them. And here comes empowerment. Now, in many ways, managers and leaders have a problem with empowering people. Some companies don't like it. Some leaders don't like it. Some managers don't like it. But when we talk about empowerment, it impacts your behavior. What does it mean? I'll give you an example. I'll take Muhammad. Muhammad, I'm going to come to him. I'm going to delegate to him and say, Muhammad, I'm going to delegate to you today. I want you to do this job. That's the authority. These are the what you need to do. Go ahead and do it. Now, Muhammad feels good about it. Said, you know what? I'm autonomous today. Some people don't feel comfortable with empowering others. So when we talk about empowerment, we talk about structural empowerment and felt empowerment. Structural empowerment, if Muhammad is a leader or a manager, he has power that comes through the structure in the company. Felt empowerment, how do you feel in the workplace? Can you express your ideas? Can you be innovative? Can you be creative? You see, 2 important things. That's why organizational leadership is so important. Leaders and organizations can make you feel that you are empowered, but leaders and organizations also define what is the structural empowerment in the workplace. And that defines how you behave. At the end of the day, don't forget that as much as possible, wherever you work on is set properly through SMART goals. Never ever do something if it's not smart. Please. I mean, you'll be hurting yourself. Always make sure that you have SMART goals in place. You know what's specific to be done, how to measure it. How aggressive are you behind the goal? And how realistic is it to get there? And always make it time bound. Always make sure that you have a time against the goal. This way you manage yourself or you manage the people that you are working with. Now, don't forget performance appraisal. It goes hand in hand with feedback and everything. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but that performance appraisal, always keep it respectful. Always make sure it's on time. Even if it is distant. This means that I'm doing it remotely. Let's say I'm working with Rashid today. So if I'm with him on the Zoom call, I still can give him my performance appraisal. Okay. If I have issues, I'll highlight it. If he's doing well, I'll also highlight it. So all of these things are important for that performance appraisal. And don't withhold good feedback, please. Good feedback is very important, very motivational. It goes back to your job design, your job performance, and everything. That takes us to leadership and or communication. I cannot stress enough about communication, but I'd like to give you an exam here or a quiz. Let's see if you can get this one. You can be very successful leader even if you lack strong communication skills. True or false? So here comes the survey. I'm gonna close this one. I'm gonna open the survey again. And here comes, I believe it's this one. Yes, very good. Let's see. You can be very successful leader even if you lack strong communication skills. True or false? Very good. I see that the response is quite high. I appreciate that. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds just to be fair. Very good. Excellent, excellent. Fantastic. Now I'm going to stop the voting. Probably a couple of replies are going to trickle in. I'm going to stop the voting. Let me share the results with you. Okay. I hope you like the results. Many of you said false. I agree with you. Some of you said true. A very successful leader, even if you lack strong communication, you are a very successful leader. Well, maybe you have a point of view. I honestly don't know how you can do it without communication. At least from my perspective, I tell you the number one skill I look in a leader is his or her ability to communicate. That shows how emotion intelligent this person is. How able are they in persuading, convincing others, building trust. You cannot build trust and communicate with other and convince others if you cannot communicate well. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back to my slide. Okay. So for those of you who said, you cannot be, I want to thank you. Communication skills are very, very important. And I want you to do some self-reflection and ask yourself, did somebody tell me your communication skills are not very strong? Did somebody tell me you always shout when you talk? Did somebody tell me you don't listen when I talk to you? Did somebody tell me your words are very strong when you're talking to other people? Don't take it in a personal fashion. Do some self-reflection and ask yourself, how can I make myself better? That's a difference between a mature employee that I'm talking to right now and the person who doesn't care. So let's move on. So the next slide here, we talk about in business, poor communication costs money. Believe me, it costs money. And we have seen it over the past few months where poor communication has cost not only companies, but countries lots of money. So when you communicate well and you are able to bridge the gap between you and others, I tell you, companies can make wonders when it comes to success and moving forward. And one study, imagine, found that 14% of each work week is wasted on poor communication. 14%. So if you are making a billion, you already wasted 140 million. It tells you how important communication is. So this means that effective communication is an asset. And it's an important asset for organizations at the organizational level or at the individual level alike. And good communication can help retain its star employees. How many of you have thought about leaving the company when your manager said something you didn't like? He said, you know what, I don't want to work in this place. That's why communication is very, very important. So what is the communication process? Very quickly, remember, whenever you communicate, you are on one side, but there's another side listening to you. Or you are on the listening side and there's somebody talking. So imagine, always make sure that you are, playing the important role. If you are the sender, make sure you send the message clearly. If you are the receiver, make sure that you listen well. And make sure that you get rid of the noise if there's any, and make sure that your message is delivered the right way and you're using the right means. I tell you, communication is wonderful. I love communication. And there are three types of communication that I want you to be aware of. The verbal, the words that you say. Written, the written communication. How many emails many people sent and they said, I wish I didn't send it. And then you have the non-verbal. How we talk, how we walk, how we nod our head, how we squint our eyes. All of these things are important. So be aware of these methods of communication because they are critical. At the end of the day, you as a manager or employee, that's how time is being spent at work. Many of the managers are spending 46% talking to subordinates, 14% talking to superiors, talking to other colleagues, and sometimes reaching out. So imagine how important communication is. So please take communication quite seriously. It makes a difference. Now, talking about leadership and management, I have a couple of more questions for you. There are no differences between leadership and management. True or false? Let me see if I can get the survey out for you. I think it's, I believe, next question number 5. Here we go. There are no differences between leadership and management. What do you think? I will do my best to wrap within the 4 or 5 minutes so that I let you go. I really appreciate the fact that you have spent the time with us today, and I want to thank you for that. So, true or false, there are no difference between leaders and managers. I'm going to give every one of you another few another few seconds, and then, all right, 5 more seconds. and the voting. I'm going to share the results, and all of you said false, and I want to thank you for that. It is true. There are differences between leaders and managers, and let me share with you a beautiful slide, And here it is. You see, at the end of the day, there are differences. And if you remember at the beginning of the call, I said, where do leaders come from? Leaders come from managers. But before I become a before I become a leader, I'm a manager. So that's what you do. Look at the beautiful difference here. And this is based on a very nice article that came out in the Wall Street Journal. And the author did a fantastic job in differentiating between both. And I really like it. I think it says a lot. So I will leave this for you. When you receive the copy of the slides, go through it, understand it. And remember, at some stage, you're going to be more on, if you become a successful leader, you're going to find yourself more on the right-hand side and letting go of the things on the left-hand side. That's a beautiful slide, honestly. Moving on. So we encounter different types of groups in the workplace. Some of them are the informal groups, some of them are the formal groups. The informal groups are our colleagues we talk to in many ways, maybe in the alley next to the cooler, but the formal are our managers and subordinates. So please remember, there are certain dynamics controlling or dictating how we behave with them. Typically, we are more relaxed with the informal group. But when it comes to the formal group and you are part of a project, this means that you have to abide by certain procedures and rules and regulations that the group leader or the manager puts in place. So whenever we talk about groups, there are certain dynamics any group goes through. And Bruce Tuckman, a very famous psychologist, talked about the formation of the team. And he says that these dynamics start showing from the formation to the storming, to the norming, to the performing, to the adjourning. Forming means putting the team together. Storming means I'm not understand Samir. I don't understand him. I don't know what he wants. I don't understand Taysir or Taha. Or maybe Yazid. I don't know. Yazid seems to take everything. You see, this is storming. We're fighting with each other or we're trying to understand each other. But norming is important because now we understand each other. I understand my roles and responsibilities. Now I'm better at it. Performing means that everybody knows what they're doing, they're clear on their deliverables, and they perform in a very high fashion. They deliver the best results. Adjourning is when the team is broken up and given a chance to work on another project. So the psychology is very important. Group dynamics, we call it. I suggest you read more on this. It's beautiful. And lots of studies on teamwork today because companies are realizing that teams deliver big time if you manage them very well. It's the same thing with sports. You probably heard about Messi leaving Barcelona. Why do you think he left? He feels that maybe the team is not pushing enough or maybe the coach is not treating him well. He had to leave. Many people are saying he's leaving to Manchester City. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's teams. Teams are very important. So team leadership and autonomy, you have the traditional manager-led team where the manager sits on top and says, do this, do that. The self-managed team where the team manage themselves with some direction of the leader. And then you have the self-directed team. This means that the team does not have a manager. They know how to deal themselves. Which team do you prefer? It depends on your personality in many ways. So team management means creating team norms and roles and expectations. It also requires that you run your team very, very effectively. And in sports, we learn a lot about teams. So, but problems can arise. There are always challenges with teams. Some people want to dominate other team members. Sometimes poor performance due to the performance of some team members. Sometimes the manager or the team leader does not know how to manage the team and conflicts arise. And in light of these conflicts, you have to make sure that you overcome them because sources of conflicts are many, and especially in organizations. And remember what we talked about before. Companies that have conflicts and problems, but they manage to solve them, that's not a bad place to be. But if you have lots of conflicts and there's no resolution, that's a bad place to be. So where do conflicts come from? I don't know my job very well. I don't have enough resources. Communication is broken down. Personality clashes. I don't like her. He doesn't like me. Power. So all of these things are important sources of conflict, and you have to either resolve them or get help to resolve them. Why? Because at the end of the day, we don't mind if you are here in the middle. Notice this level of conflict, this level right over here, this is a very, very and highly productive group of people. Why? Because they're very engaging. They give and take, they exchange opinions. But you don't want to be at either end. You don't want to be here where you are complacent, and you don't want to be here where you're fighting all the time. But here in the middle, that's not the bad place to be. So when we deal with conflicts, either you're competing all the time, either you're avoiding all the time, either you're accommodating all the time, or either you're compromising or you're collaborating. Does this remind you of another slide we talked about? Probably it does. Concern for results and concerns for people, the same thing. So our concerns for results or people also lead to certain conflict, and how you deal with these things makes a whole difference. So based on the conflicts, you have to apply certain management styles. And based on the studies, there are several management styles. Let's come toward the end of the session here. Leading people within the organization, you need to understand that there are certain management styles you have to be aware of, or management approaches. This is your last question, and I'm starting to wrap up. Behaviors of people-oriented leaders include showing concern for employee feelings, treating employee with respect, true or false. So here comes the survey, and here comes the last question of the survey. Behaviors of people-oriented leaders include showing concern for people feelings or treating people with respect. Let's see. Very good. Excellent. Thanks to all of you who are participating with the questions. I appreciate that a lot. Fantastic. Very good. I'm going to end the voting in a couple of seconds. I'm going to share the results with you. All right. So here we go. Ending the results. I'm going to share with you the results. All of you said true. Well done. I'm very, very impressed. This is very good. So let me close this one. And I'm going to now go back to my slides. Now, we talked about this. Notice what I said. Behavior of people-oriented leaders. Leaders who have concern for people. They usually show concern for employees' feelings, and they treat employees with respect. And you nailed it. At the end of the day, there are certain traits, like you have traits for employees, you have traits for managers and leaders, especially leaders. And the traits that we like to see in leaders, impact the physical and psychological attributes of people, how we view these leaders. So a lot of research has taken place recently, and here are some of the things we like. Does the leader have integrity? Are they intelligent? Are they extroverted? This means that they like talking to people. Are they conscientious? Are they open to experience? For example, if Rashid comes to me, or Kais, or Musa, he says, Jamal, I have this idea. I say, tell me about it. Some managers who are not open to ideas, they have problems listening to ideas from employees. Self-esteem. They build your self-esteem. They build the trust in you. So these traits are critical in leaders today. Are there others? Of course there are. But these are the ones usually rank very high most of the time. When people talk about leaders, that's what they like to see. This means that the behavior approach of leaders result in two things: task-oriented and people-oriented, which we talked about before, by the way. And we saw the grid where task-oriented people are very much goal-oriented. People-oriented, they give and take with people. So this is normal, and you have to understand your leader. If one advice I like to share with you at this stage is try to understand the manager you're working for, and if you're a manager, try to understand the people that you are working for. Why? Because both types of behavior in aggregate are beneficial. You need to achieve your goal, but at the same time, you need to manage people. So when you demonstrate that you are people-oriented, you are managing people, you're motivating them through trust and everything. But at the same time, you want to use the trust to push the arrival and the achievement of results and goals that you have. In this case, we have three main decision-making styles: either the authoritarian, where you are the decision maker, nobody else. Democratic, where you ask opinion and you say, for example, Simon, what do you think? Should we go with this? So you're trying to seek people's opinion and input. Or laissez-faire. Laissez-faire means that, guys, you do it. You are the ones who know about it. Go ahead and make a decision. It depends in many ways on the situation, but it also depends on your abilities and capabilities and your maturity. And be careful how you apply these decision making styles. If you apply them the wrong way, they can lead to the wrong result. But if you apply them the right way, they can give you some excellent results. And this takes us to a couple of theories: Fiedler's Blanchard Hersey situation theory, which we talked about before, path call theory, which we also mentioned before, and Vroom and Newton normative decision model. Very interesting. I'll stop at this one a little bit and then I'll tell you what it means. Now, when we talk about this one, this is the Blanchard Hersey situation leadership. Based on the competence and based on the situation, how do you behave with people? What kind of a decision would you make? For example, if the competence is low and the commitment is high, the recommended style is you go directing behavior. Notice competence is low, commitment is high. You direct this person, you tell them what to do because they don't have any competence. But if the competence is low, but the commitment is low, you try to coach this person, coach them, bring them up a little bit. If the competence is moderate and the commitment is variable, you try to support. You use the supportive behavior. But if you have high on both sides, you delegate, laissez-faire. You say, you know what, I think you can do it. Some of you on this call, you're very, very good to the extent where you can make decisions and move things forward. But if your manager does not delegate to you, sometimes you feel frustrated. I know, I've been in that situation. I'm talking to you from experience. I love this one. This one, what we call the Vroom and Newton normative decision making. Some people, by the way, they use it quite a bit. They actually take you through this process downward until they reach to the recommended approach at the bottom. So you answer high or low. For example, decision significance. Is the decision significance high? You go down this way. If the decision significance is low, you go that way. And you start going through these tiers until you reach the best possible decision making. I love this one. It's very nice. I think Vroom and Newton put lots of effort behind it. Does it work? I think it can be a good guide, but be careful how you apply it. I'll leave this one for your reading pleasure. At the end, some additional leadership that we see today, transformation leaders. This is what we're going through today, guys. With COVID-19, lots of companies are transforming. Leader-member exchange. If I give you something, what do you give me in return? Servant leadership, serving the organization, authentic leadership, those with integrity. Yes, we have many types of leadership. And as I said, you might decide on your own style of leadership. Transformation leaders have 4 kinds of styles: from charisma, inspirational, intellectual, individualized consideration. This means that they give you attention to you, they listen to you. Individualized consideration. The last one, the last slide that I like to talk about is the leader-member exchange. Notice the leader on this side, the left-hand side, and the consequences on the right-hand side. So if the leader is fair, most of the time you're happy, you're satisfied. If the leader delegates, the organization is more committed. So you see the exchange? You see what's happening between these two? How you behave on the left-hand side has consequences on the right-hand side. That's what we call the leader-member exchange theory. Don't forget the ethical code, guys. Ethics are very important. In my opinion, they are the foundation of everything we do. Always keep ethics as a guiding light. We have seen lately a lot of leaders questioning the role of ethics. I think that business ethics is important. Get exposed to it, know about it, deal with it, and understand the ethical codes in your company and how to operate. And if you feel the ethical code is weak and you feel that ethical code should be strong, maybe this is the wrong place for you. But if there's a match, congratulations, you're working in the right place. Other than that, I like to wrap up. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I took 20 minutes of your time. You guys are very generous. These are some of the reading books. I love this book, The Power of Habit, the yellow one. It's a very, very good book. Get it. Also, Teams of Teams, very, very nice by McChrystal. It's a very nice book. And then the other books have been around for some time, but they are very good. If you are interested in change, John Carter is always a good read. But other than that, I want to thank you for today. Here are some of the courses we're running. We're running them in September. Yes, we are running a course in September, and we are running some courses in 2021. Don't forget to reach out or find me on LinkedIn. This is my link over here. If you need a copy of this presentation, please send me an email to jsaeed@meirc.com. I'll send it to you PDF, and I look forward to hearing from you in future courses. Many, many thanks for today. Thank you for your commitment today, and take care, guys. I always look forward to seeing you in future webinars, and God bless and have a wonderful week and weekend ahead. Take care.
Meirc.com